first-timers, welcome back to people who have been to our series. This is our 4th year for the Centerbrook Architecture Lecture Series. We're just having a fabulous time with this, and it looks from the crowd, since it's completely sold out, anybody who enters the room now has to stand. So give yourselves a hand. Thank you very much for showing up. And a big round of applause for Beth Goodnow and her Essex Meadow staff, because without their facility and Beth's wonderful nibbles and wine and treats and chairs and stage and projector and electricity and heat, our poor little library would only be able to hold a third of you. So you're all here because of Essex Meadow. So thank you very much. And our second big thank you goes to Centerbrook Architects, because without Centerbrook Architects, the Essex Library, as a member-owned library, could not afford to pay to have speakers come in and give us the information and education and entertainment that they do so obligingly and with smiles and gusto. So thank you, Centerbrook Architects. And with that, I would like to tell you that this is the first of the series for 2011-2012. We are going to skip January. We always have problems with weather, so we're just going to try to avoid it. In early February, we have Joe Moore, who is currently teaching at Yale and Columbia, and he is in India right now. But he will be coming in to talk about some really cool hip houses that he builds and designs all over New England and out west, a lot of ski houses and things like that. At the end of February, we've got Dr. Chuck Benson coming back to give us an architectural history, this time I think about Gaudi. So that should be a visually stunning show. In March, April, May, and June, we've got Louis Raymond, the wonderful landscape designer, coming back. We've got Carol Bentel of Bentel & Bentel out of Long Island. They've designed some of the most gorgeous restaurants and other buildings in New York City that you'll ever get to go into. We have Tom Howarth from Mississippi, who was partners with Sam Mockbee out of the
Rural Studio.
Thank you, Rural Studio. Sorry, I'm jet lagged. Who has done just the most incredible work with found materials, building houses and recreation centers and churches for people who could not afford shelter otherwise. And we have.
That's it.
Well, I'm here tonight.
Oh, and that's not my job. So with that, I will give you Jim Childress of Centerbrook Architects to introduce Duo Dickinsen.
Thank you all for coming. I didn't want to give Duo a fat head, but I think this is a bigger turnout than we had for Jim Watson, the DNA guy. So don't publish that.
I'm in the first row, but I would suspect that people don't hear you in the back.
Can you hear me in the back? Thank you.
Okay.
I'd like to introduce Duo. We've crossed paths over the years, but I don't think I've seen you in 20 years. We're the same age. I've sort of grown up here in Connecticut architecture. And one of my favorite quotes recently was something that Steve Jobs once said about what made him a success. He said, you know, why join the Navy when you can be a pirate? And you know, he was talking about how to move the world forward and do creative things. And I think Duo is a leader in our profession of architecture. And he is making a difference, and he's moving us forward. And I think, when I think of, say, the movie of the Pirates of the Caribbean, I think he's a pirate. I think in our profession, many of us are pretty buttoned up, stiff guys, men and women. And I think Duo stands out by keeping us all grounded. He looks at what's practical, how to make more of what you already have, and he sort of says, it's not all about you, Mr. Architect. There's something larger out there. So he designs, builds, and then he writes about it all. And I do think of him kind of as the Johnny Depp of our profession. And in fact, I think this was confirmed when I shared that he was coming with a colleague of ours, who's actually a rather buttoned-up guy from Fairfield. And knew Duo at Cornell. I'll tell you who it is later.
I know who it is.
Okay.
My TA when I was a freshman.
Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, so he he laughed and said, you know, he was extremely talented, but the hard thing for all of us was that all the girls were more interested in him. It was proof that he's that.
Good liar, actually, yeah.
Good liar. Well, he's gone on to be a great family guy. His wife is here with us tonight, and he's gone on to influence a lot of us with his insights. I hope you enjoy this. Thank you.
Well, first of all, I want to thank the library, because without the library there would be no books, and without books I wouldn't get $1.20 every time you buy one of those. And so please buy all of them, and we have about 100 little tabs afterward that I will sign for you, even if they don't have sufficient copies of the book. So you will all be served tonight. And I'd like to take a little point of personal privilege about Centerbrook Architects, because how many people here remember the original name of Centerbrook? Well, like 3. Good marketing there, Centerbrook. The original name of Centerbrook was Moore, Grover, Harper. And Grover and Harper, you know, are fixtures here. And my beloved sort of mentor, Charlie Moore, you know, died a while ago. But the truth is, it was one of the most, when I first met Jim, at least 30 years ago, it was one of these very interesting places where they had 5 or 6 partners and 7 or 8 interns. It was maybe like 15 people. And of course they told all of the interns, oh, you know, just stick with it and you'll become a partner. And Jim did. That might be it. Anyway, the story tonight, the actual story tonight is like a story within a story. Obviously, this is a book that's relatively timely because of the demographic zeitgeist of all of us baby boomers getting old and having horrible joint afflictions and children that abandon us and then children that come back, and, you know, bringing our parents into our house instead of getting them into a great place like Essex Meadows, and so all that stuff that happens during this particular moment in time is there, but it's also really a story about how. Tonight, I want to show how a book like this happens. It's a story not just about the contents of the book, which you'll see. And you'll see photographs that are not in the book and some backstories about that. But also, how does a book get made in the worst economic recession in the history of economic recessions? Well, it gets made in a very circuitous way. So I think with that, I will start, because I think everybody is probably filled with wine and cheese and wants to move on. I mean, let's face it, you know, 4 years ago, 4.5 years ago, we were in an economy where the houses that we were buying, those things that we were consuming and dropping into the shopping carts of our net equity, were the hottest thing going. They were the quick ticket to getting rich. They were the quick ticket to self-expression. There was no issue about indebtedness because they would keep on rising in income forever. I mean, income and worth forever and ever. And the world was just your oyster because it was just a never-ending sea of just growth. And you could understand kind of why something like that would happen. Oops, sorry. Something like that would happen because the truth is, where we live is really one of the most seminally important things in our lives. It is the single most important possession for most of us on an emotional level, but clearly on a financial level, both in terms of risk, in terms of debt, and also in terms of the money that you've made being invested. And back 4 years ago, it was in terms of the economic engine that would provide for your retirement and a new Lexus. And what that engine fevered up was this rush to build zillions of horrifically designed or non-designed huge buildings that were just from Mars, and they were called houses. And those houses were marketed like sausages and plopped on lots like you wouldn't believe, to the point where this was actually, an architect sent this to me back in the day. And if you notice, there might have been a slight marketing impediment there, which they kind of danced around. But that is the sort of thing that happens when you've got this incredible rush to make unlimited money, and you end up carpet bombing the landscape with these mushrooms of sort of ecological and financial, it turned out, destruction. When in truth, the whole reason why that happened was actually at the seminal root of all humans, which is the desire to nest, the desire to have a safe harbor, to have a place that reflects your values, that actually will sustain you when you come in from a world that is often hostile and dangerous and threatening. You want to be able to find a safe place like the Rose Cottage from the 16th century in England that basically feels like it will protect you, it will make you safe. But what we have transmogrified that into is kind of this classically, I think, and wonderfully kind of American zeitgeist of more is better and faster and glitzier, and if I build a really super great house, I'll be just like them. My house will make me a better person, will make my kids love me, will make my bank account be bigger. It's all good. And it really comes back to the fact that it is actually buried in our brains that our houses are the natural extension of who we are. They are, in fact, our largest set of clothing. They are how we present ourselves to the world, and if those pants chafe, as mine often do, they will actually make a daily, hourly, minute-by-minute source of anxiety, pain, frustration, and anger at a world that's treated you so unfairly. Well, you can see that depth of personal commitment to homes and housing drove a market up and up and up and up and up. And then, yeah, right about there, you ended up having a market which, preying on that deep human emotion and not having my profession as the kind of countervailing force for reason and expression of truth in a sea of over-optimism, saying to them, no, 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 keep buying houses, the American dream, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, buy, don't have equity, don't worry about anything, keep buying. And just like the tulips did in the Renaissance, there's a point at which you say, wait a minute, there's value and there's worth, and when the two things disconnect, truth inevitably happens. But you go beyond truth and you go all the way down here. Now realize, this is put up with the National Association of Home Builders, the NAHB. The date is here, and this is what they want it to be, and it's not actually really there yet. And what we had was we went from basically 2 million houses being built, and sometimes almost 3 million houses being built, to basically going all the way down to a very 322,000 sold last year. And these numbers, I won't bore you with them, but basically the idea is that everything's down more than half, almost sometimes down to a third of what it was in terms of building, occupying, selling, and that really says that people have stopped moving. They're stopped moving into this context of a static housing consumer population. Runs into this slowly advancing juggernaut of architects' indifference to people who do not see the beauty of architecture. And that is what Progressive Architecture, a long-dead magazine, this is from 1995, this is how they presented what the American home meant to the American housing consumer. A pastiche of predictable, mundane, bourgeois elements that designed to make us all feel better about ourselves, when in truth it just showed how completely unenlightened and prosaic and closed-minded we were. And this comes from an academic institution of all the architecture schools that I know of, except for McGill, which actually has a wonderful program that was designed for houses, that promulgates the house as a twin reality. The first reality is it is the building. It is the blank canvas upon which all architecture can express itself. That's where Frank Lloyd Wright got his bones. That's where Le Corbusier got his bones. That's where Michael Graves got his bones. This is how young architects show how incredibly gifted they are. But for the rest of us, this is actually from the year 2000. This is a thesis at Yale that they bound into a very cool book called The Millennium House. This is one student's vomiting up of what he thought about what a house means in America. And I'll just read it for you because I like to. It says, this is the American house. I am wasteful of materials, inefficient in my functioning, and I rely on the desire to impress and control others through the illusion of wealth and a false participation in a history that is anything but my own. And I showed this slide about 7 years ago in Chicago, and I was talking about how this is the academic zeitgeist. This is the way we're based it, in the sense that houses are essentially for the vast majority of the 97% of the population that doesn't use architects to do houses, they are this incredibly, this depressing indication of just how shallow we are and for architecture schools. And this person came up to me and he said to me, "Hey, Duo, I'm so glad you showed this slide because I designed that house." And he meant it. He thought it was high praise that somebody would take one of his works and diss it like this. Well, that sensibility, when it comes to renovating houses, makes for this kind of architectural mockery of indigenous, crafty, traditional things, where you basically have to do one of these at the parent building, because obviously I'm an architect and you're not. And that sensibility permeates the way people think about houses and architects. And one of the great, great, great legacies of Charles Moore and Moore Grover Harper and Centerbrook is that they've spent now over 40 years chipping away at the inaccessible elitism that architects present in so much of what they do to everyone. Centerbrook is one of those firms that actually reaches out and does things like this here for you because they don't think they're better than you, they think they are you. And that is actually what I think is the future of architecture in general, but especially for residential architecture. So we have this collision. We have a collision of an academy that basically thinks of itself as perfect, timeless, monolithic innovation, and they are standing in the way of a pedestrian, pedantic, unimportant, trivial, craft and self-delusion. But that's not true of all architects. Between the two world wars, the small architects collaboration out of Minneapolis designed it was actually the Small Architects Bureau, Small House Architects Bureau out of Minneapolis, designed 20,000 houses before the Depression put them out of business. After Katrina, the Katrina houses actually showed that architects can make a difference in times of disaster. A group of us, Dennis Wedlick, Jeremiah Eck, and myself, created something called the Congress of Residential Architecture, CORA. And we have been around for about 8 years, and we're having our 8th annual meeting next week in Phoenix, Arizona. And basically, we're about 1,000 ad hoc professionals of not necessarily licensed architects, they're designers, they're anybody, but basically the idea is professional design services are a good idea for houses, especially when the worth of those houses has fallen through the floor and, conversely, bathed and born in that go-go, freak-out disassociation from value hype time. We were hopefully the voice of reason that prevented people from buying houses they shouldn't have and renovating houses they shouldn't have. But at the root of all of that desire, striving for relevancy, really is, for almost all of us boomer architects that were educated in the 60s and 70s and wanted to do houses, or wanted to do houses because of a book, The Place of Houses, and I want you to see who was the primary author of that. Charles Moore, who practiced architecture here for over a decade, almost 20 years, wrote a book just like Staying Put that was written by architects. All those authors are architects, but not for other architects. It was distinctively written for the housing consumer to say, you can have more than the market will give you. You need the help of somebody that can see through the hype of builders, to see through the baloney of the building department, that can actually show you what's possible in a landscape. You don't have to settle for a stock plan. And that sensibility led me to write. And I want you to see here that this is Mr. Floyd's, Chad Floyd's edition, I think probably about 2 miles from here. And this was my introduction was actually written by Charles Moore. So this is not a new thing. I may be a pirate, but I'm not an innovative pirate. I'm a led by dead architects pirate into a place that I think makes us more relevant and makes us accessible to people. That book, Adding On, sold over 50,000 copies in 1984. The intervening books sold a lot. The last one that I wrote for Taunton was in the middle of the belly of the beast of overvaluation when people thought, I can't even begin to afford to build a house. Everything is so crazy expensive. I wrote a book that had 20 houses by 15 architects that actually said, here's how you build a cheaper custom house. And it was called The House You Build because it was during the boom time and you want to sort of relate to people in the boom time. And then as soon as the hammer began to come down, the Taunton folk are not stupid, the exact same book went paperback, sold another 25,000 copies under the name of when this was going downhill under the name of, forgot that cue, House on a Budget. So basically, you know, the house you built, a house on a budget. And basically, if you know Mr. Architect Mueller, here he is here. That's his house, again, about 2 miles from here. Now, this all came, this book that you see here, Staying Put, came from the fact that I signed 2 contracts after the House You Build / House on a Budget with Taunton. I signed a contract for the next book. And so we had this wonderful idea that in this horrible time where you would buy a raised ranch for $600,000 somewhere, and then you'd be having to spend $150,000 to make it detox. Basically, the idea was, how could we show people that even though 20th century homes based on 18th century prototype house designs don't cut it functioning in the 21st century, even though that's true, you could actually do something about it. So we went through some different titles, and we began to write, and I got a nice advance, and we're talking about how these predictable houses that were designed for no site, for no client, were plopped onto these very different environments, very different sites, different adjacencies. The plans were often cellular because there wasn't any central heating when the prototypes were done. And we were all sort of also bathed in the 1950s post-World War II zeitgeist where, you know, innovation was, you know, very kind of hip and mod, and men on Sunday would eat meat and cook meat, and there were, you know, carports for a single car, and there was this sort of like plastic dome in the middle of winter where your son would get frostbite while somebody was doing something unnatural with a snowman, and life was super groovy until it wasn't. And the unspoken truth of all of this depression and down sense of design and architecture is that even though obviously when the poop hit the HVAC system, everything started to, you know, we're crash, 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 really at the bottom for remodeling, things bounce back pretty quickly. And what you see here for 11, we're right about where we were before the crash happened. This is historically true. Only this used to be, instead of being 4 years, this used to be 1 year. So the truth is, this is probably going to be a recession that lasts for a decade, but it will be a recession that basically will ultimately accrue to the benefit of what people perceive as value in the place where they live. But it's easy to sort of, you know, to curse the darkness and to say how crappy your house is. But you really have to understand that, just like anybody going to rehab, you have to acknowledge that it doesn't work for you. That's the first step. How does it not work? It isn't just that it is bad. How does it work for you? Well, the first issue, when they basically canceled that book contract, I came back at them a year or two later and said, well, listen, people are pissed. They're angry. They want to change things. I think we should change the whole concept of the book to My House Sucks. Stop hating your home and love where you live. Now, if you know Taunton Press, they sort of looked at me in this very nice way and said, oh, great. Great. We'll get back to you on that. And so, you know, and so I was dealing with clients every day. We have a firm of 10 people. We have 40 or 50 projects every year. And basically, you know, we were hearing people that were just depressed and angry. And so we went, and these are actual working, by the way, covers done by a brilliant artist named Bill Brown. We went back to, you know, like, really, it sucks. It really sucks. It's really bad. You know, and we kept on coming back to them with ideas of how can we make it palatable? How can we capture this zeitgeist? How could we basically say, it's not a good idea to change one tire in your car. You should change all the tires in your car. You don't have to buy a new car, but you can actually change some tires and feel better. And still, you know, my house sucks. Well, what we did was, and because Taunton prevailed, as they should, because it's, you know, you get kind of wrapped up in these things and you want to sort of change the universe and you realize that you might be a pirate, but you know, your 6 guns only shoot about 100 feet. That 2 things had to happen. I said 2 things had to happen because the nature of Taunton is that they do the most beautiful books on architecture that you can have. They are perfect books on houses. They're beautiful. The writing is excellent, gorgeous. They cost $48 a piece. They sold no books in 2009, no books in 2010, and they said, Duo, you'll be our first architecture thing, but they signed the book in 2010. It's got to be done in less than a year because if we're going to capture this zeitgeist you've been screaming at us about My House Sucks about, you basically have to get it done. And so what we did was I said, well, if we're going to get it done, I want it to be a small, heavy in your hands, nice paper book with a zillion illustrations and feel like an actual paper website. Feel like there's so much encoded and dense packed information that was laterally and collaterally and interrelated that people could find themselves going back and forth through the book. And that meant that it really had to be cheap. I also said we have to have a web component. We actually have to have something on the web. And we actually had Taunton Press for the very first time put a scanning emblem on their cover. That was very, very scary for them. And so we created this book. And the book was made affordable by two things. Number one, its format, which got one reviewer on Amazon saying how they felt gypped, and gypped for 16 bucks is hard to imagine in a book with color illustrations, but they felt gypped. But it also was because I could use all the photography that I'd had over the years with one photographer. That meant that for the first time in six books, or the seventh book, all the work in it had to be mine, which is somewhat of a letdown. I liked showing a lot of architects' work. We couldn't have made the book affordable had it had to reach out and have sent a photographer around the country. So we were able to get the photography down, so the book would be $24.95 and about 16 bucks on Amazon. And $24.95 here, which you should do because Essex Books is worth all the extra money. Anyway, and we're going to have basically staying put the website. It's up now, but don't go there because it's awful, because it doesn't have about 3/4 of the material that's going to be on it. But when all the material gets on it, it's going to be extraordinary. It's going to be very interactive. There's going to be tons of stuff you can't see in the book. It'll interlace all the things that are happening in the book. You'll see whole houses together as opposed to little pieces and parts. It'll be quite fun. The truth is that even though I am purveying what dead architects have spoken of for the last generation or two, the truth is the idea of staying put is hundreds or thousands of years old. Basically, it's the idea that the home that you live in is not a stage set that you place your objects temporarily around like some sort of scene from a reality television show. Your house used to be, for almost everyone in the world, but especially in America, it used to be a place that was your family. That in the book, Little House, Big House, Back House, Barn, one of the great books on architecture in America, they followed houses in New Hampshire and Maine that started out like this, and as the weather got worse in the Little Ice Age, more and more of the domesticated stuff became part of the professional life, and the buildings actually ended up becoming not just places to live for multiple generations, but places to work and to basically center multi-generational families around for the unknown past and for all the foreseeable future. And what that simply means is that people took control. In East Haddam, an interior of a schoolhouse went from was renovated in the 60s, and in the renovation of the 60s, a really super groovy architect decided to have like a peninsula here and a screening wall there and a table here. So there was no countertops, but you got this weird little cool baffle. This got very close to the wall, and what we did was we took out these non-bearing walls because it was a big open space, and we basically made a kitchen that was still tucked around a corner, but we actually were able to get some trim and actually able to get a sense of depth, and it made it something which reflected what the owners wanted, which was openness. In a 1989 bloat ranch burger, they basically, McMansion, they had the double height staircase that no one likes or uses with the undifferentiated sheetrock everywhere. And we came in and basically took all the existing lines and just interconnected everything that was there. We didn't change the stairs a drop. We didn't change any of the openings at all. We simply connected the dots with a good craftsman, and it made it something they could touch. And there are trends. There are these long trends that are new. They're basically, the plastic slipcover and the living room, the similar idea, that sort of social condom of the American living room, where you kept all your friends at bay and safe away from where you lived. That is something that we undo on a regular basis. So part of this book is about what do I undo as an architect? Well, I undo. This is a sort of a bizarre contemporaneal house where it's kind of like colonial-ish 80s here, and it's sort of contemplacious, so sort of around in here. And we kind of took that and kept this where it was, kept the windows over here, and we just did a very simple, direct job of interconnecting parts and making things happen. And in this house, this is the house that you see. We played with the entry. We played with a couple. We made actually this part connect to the grade, which didn't before. Made this bigger. We also, this is on the water. The water's like here. And so there was this bay window, and that bay window was this. And so we just made the bay window, oops, we just made the bay window this. So we took what was existing to the right and extended it to the left. That's all we did. And we actually had some fun with a good craftsman and made something that was nice. This is a little house in Guilford, and this basically had a structural column here, and it made for some incredibly beautiful millwork. Dental work, I might add. This is an A face red oak veneer stained, I think, with, what is it? It might be called colonial. I'm not sure. But anyway, what we wanted to do there was, here's what you just saw. There's the column, there's the fireplace. You entered in this weird rickety thing over here, and this was all kind of blank, and they had a beautiful side yard here. So we opened this all up, got rid of the access, made a new access through here, and what we had to do then was we had to take this column that was here and move it to there. Well, you know, that's kind of a simple thing, but it's also an opportunity to do something just like this, where basically all you're doing is you're basically taking the existing beam and you're cutting it and you're splaying out this and you're making it into a thing that allows uninterrupted flow from the new entry into here. These are the small, small things that people think are insurmountable objects to their happiness. In truth, they're not. This is an 18th century home in Brantford, and it didn't have a garage. And the owner said, I can't make a garage without totally screwing up the house. And I said, well, you know, maybe. But you know, you've got this full basement here that's doing nothing, and the grade falls away. So if we open this up, you can basically have a garage and not change what the house looks like from the street at all. And thank God all the grading went so all the water would drain away from it, and the house remained as is, and it felt natural like it had always been there. In a totally different house in Madison, this sort of notched contemporary house, this modernist wedge house, had this weird, it's on a salt marsh, had this weird little decky thing that never stopped leaking from the moment it was built. And it separated the people from the master bedroom from actually seeing the beautiful water view out here. And so all we did was we took this little notch and we filled it. And we basically filled it and gave it a little zoomy extra kick over the existing roof and made it look like it had always been there simply because we thought about it a little bit. But those are nice trends, but the greatest trend of the last 10 to 20 years, the one that is incredibly intense, has been the desire of homeowners to connect their houses to the environment. And I do actually think this gets a little bit new agey and crystal-like, but you know, I'm 56, it's getting that time. Basically, kids are going to college, you know, what else am I going to think about? So the bottom line is that people look at, do I have it? Well, they look at these things, you look at your smartphone, you look at these screens all the time. You watch 700 channels on your screen. You correspond with somebody that's angry at you in Uganda on your screen. Somebody who wants money from you because they lost their wallet in London on the screen. It's basically, you see all of this stuff that's happening about 5 inches from your face, and I honestly believe that we autonomically are rejecting that faux reality, which is incredibly real in its own faux way. We're rejecting that faux reality and trying to get to the realist reality, which is being out in the world around us, unprocessed. Well, the houses that have been built around us that never considered the site they're built on anyway are completely ignorant of the sites around them. And then we do things like plant little tiny plants that then end up, I shouldn't have done that, that then end up eating our houses. These gigantic plants sort of take over and they destroy even the faintest connection you might have to, in this case, a wonderful view of a pond over here. So all we did was we basically got rid of the big stuff and made this wraparound porch and made the railings out of metal. And all we did in the plan was we just connected the existing stair, made 2 straight lines, took the header of this window and just made it into a door. That's it. That allows us to spend extra money to have nice stone piers and some little architectural niceness. And we also are fighting continually in this sort of anti-enclosure, pro-open, exophoric, get out in the world sensibility that's taking over against these neo-traditional homes built basically as boxes for profit by builders where little tiny windows are sort of arrayed because back when this house was originally designed in 1724, you had all of your heat from a little fireplace at the center of the house that now doesn't exist, and pieces of glass probably cost as much as a television set now. And you basically said, well, I'll have these little tiny windows, I'll huddle around the fireplace, and so I won't see outside, that's okay because I'm not going to die when it's 20 degrees outside. Well, we now have something called central heating. And so this becomes kind of this sad leftover thing from bygone era. And you also have this thing of a center hall colonial not really being centered. And you also have got windows so the cars can see you when you come home. Hi, Dad. Hi. Welcome home. And you end up being very, in this owner's case, who is a gardener, feeling like I love my gardens, I spend my life gardening, and I can't see my garden. So all we did was we added this pavilion that's at grade and took this blank corner and made it into a transition place and brought this down so that when you are inside this classic 1990s colonial house with little tiny windows, there's one place you can go to where you actually end up feeling like you're outside when you're inside, protected but connected. The idea being that you can actually feel like you are in possession of your land as opposed to sailing on the sea of your land. And not all bad houses were done in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Probably most of them were, but this is a house done in the 20s in Stanford with this newfangled idea that you would drive this thing called a car? Was it a car? Automobile? And because those things were so weird and freaky, they actually put the cars off the street. They drove into your backyard and brought them in from your backyard into the back of your house. Well, the owners also were kind of freaky, interested in gardening people. And they said, you know, first of all, that's my kitchen. I've got a living room over here. I have no place to actually connect where I eat with where I live. And so we said, well, we can fix that. So we popped out of here, made something that followed, again, the radial patterns of the gardens they ended up planting. And we just took this kitchen and we opened up this corner completely. So you can see this is an isolated box of a kitchen. There was the gigantic garage. And you were trapped, and there's the living room, and there's like no way to get there. So basically what we did was we made this the living space. This is the ceremonial, you know, intimidate the boyfriend when he comes to date your daughter space. And we did add on a new entry. Well, I can't. It's only one off. I charge for that. But basically when you do something like this, you make this big wall of glass. Glass is not happy with lots of sun. It bakes you in the summertime. It also destroys, weather destroys windows, and so we then have to make super gigantic eaves to basically cover all of these nice windows, and when we do that, we have to support them. So on the inside, we had a lot of fun sort of making these radial, large-scale beams that project out and support the roof. Classic 1975 Garrison colonial thing up in Massachusetts. I've been doing this so long that when I was walked through this house in 1980, it was with a man and his first wife. His second wife, he got married, got divorced, he got a new wife, and now they basically wanted to take a house that they had owned a long time ago and connect it to the site. This is a very, very expensive project, done actually in the go-go time, but I don't think it mattered to them. They had one window that had a view of a mountain. One window that got that view. And they said, you know, if I have a mountain to look at, I want my home, which was designed, you know, for some terrarium somewhere in Indiana, I want to actually connect that place to that place. I want to have the two places I love, that view and where I live, shaking hands and actually loving each other. And so we made a deck with no rail on it, brought the grate up to it, and we filled in that crotch and made this wild, wonderful, fun family room with a equally wild and fun mud room off of where the pool is, so that you could actually have a place that made light come in from light wells overhead, so that when you were actually in the place, you felt like you were somewhat outside but completely protected. So you could see there's the little umbilical cord between mom and the baby. And then here's the garage, which we made smaller because they only needed really one car. And we made the big mudroom. We tucked the kitchen back in here. We kept this just about the same, although now we're renovating this. And basically there's a hole that we made so we could actually shed water here and shed water there in the attachment of the house, but bring light into the center. And so we control the light with these kinds of shading devices. Had a little bit of fun expressing the eaves, had just a local mason do his thing, just let him go. And we made this place where we brought trees in from the outside and brought light in and made a different kind of a house. Now that cost a ton of money, but the exact same reason that was done was why these owners, who had moved out of a house they had purchased a while ago into a smaller house in North Madison, confronted the fact that they had the house-eating plants, and they had the T111 siding and the little windows, and they had a beautiful backyard, and they had a lot of sculpture. So all we did was we took this window, put in 2 stock doors, a nice stoop and found some old bluestone and did this. It cost about $8,000 total, and what we did was completely connect the inside of the house with their sculpture and their yard. Same impetus for probably 1/40th the cost.
Wow.
You can't paint away a dysfunctional home. You can't say, oh, but I'll make it green, it'll be great. It doesn't make it better. And when this young family, and this is a very modest means family, bought this little capey thing in Madison that had this filled in between the one-car garage that was built in the late 40s, and that was their kitchen, they realized that when they were pregnant with their second child, this was not going to cut it. So what we did was we filled that in. Wow. We kept that structure. We added a shed that had to go through every zoning thing imaginable because it's in a floodplain and it encroached the sightline. We got all of the approvals, but this is all done with vinyl siding. Shh, architects can sometimes use vinyl siding. Fake stone. Shh, we sometimes use fake stone. And we basically took this and made it into this.
Wow.
And basically took, there's the line of the existing garage, there's the existing walls, there's the shed we added, there's the old kitchen that was here, we took that out, we made actually an entry, a single entry that actually had kind of a mudroom thing, a laundry right next to you, kept all of this the same to save money, and kept an existing hideous screen porch here where it was, but made the house ignore it, because, and also treated some parts with veneration. We actually used a relatively expensive e-pay for the steps and for the and not so expensive but natural mahogany for the roof, and again, vinyl stuff in here to make a very interesting hub for all of that stuff that's going on. So in the back was the hideous porch with the equally hideous detritus of childhood. And then we sort of leapt over all of that schmutz and the view of this fairly sad pool enclosure which they inherited. And we actually made these clear story lights out of very standard windows, but again, big eaves to protect all this glass. And we went from this inside to this.
Wow.
I will not claim credit for the kitchen done by a very gifted kitchen designer in Guilford, who is a grand niece of Frank Lloyd Wright. And we opened all of this up completely so that you would actually feel like the house was one continuous thing. We made these simple little closety things and then made everything register to the grid of all super standard Anderson windows, utilizing super standard flat stock trim, again registering to skylights to make it feel like it was actually built for you. This is your place that we thought about for you. Similarly, reaching out to the outside but also trying to make something out of nothing. This is a porch that no one ever used that had a sort of a view of a lake that was over here. After 20 years of occupancy, the owner said we'd had enough, so we've actually made a family room, had a little zoomy fun with a chimney thing. Again, standard windows arrayed in a way that made it work. The connections inside were all done with 3-foot wide openings. We took those openings. In this case, this opening was here, and we doubled its size here, but kept the kitchen exactly the way it was, so we'd save money. Took out this, and there you can see there's the perimeter of the deck. The town let us do that, but they said, you know what, the setback line runs here. You will chop off that corner. So we designed it with the corner taken away, and we integrated the new roofs of the old roofs just with some very simple trim. We made a place in a house that had no place to be. And actually very simple prefab firebox, a place for the TV discreetly around, tons of light, a little curve added later for not much money. And this is an errant slide, not sure where that came from, but then this is, oh actually that's not an errant slide duo, that's actually a garage that actually became an in-law apartment. Mom and Dad were coming back, Dad was very ill, we made a little house for them and took over the garage, and I can tell you that actually, here it is. The garage is here, and we renovated the inside of the house, opened everything up. And this made a little porch for Mom, made a new entry, rooflet to draw your attention. And we actually planned in the garage, and I can tell you right now, after 2 years of occupancy, 2 teachers on 2 teachers' salaries are able to do this renovation and are now building the garage. Now, the last thing I'm going to show you, I think it's the last thing, is a condo. I mean, let's face it, this is, am I not correct? This is a form of condominium unit. This is a shared living environment where you have home ownership. I don't think Essex Meadows would let you make that window into a bay window. I think they would say, you know what? The skin is the skin. Maybe you have some fun on the inside, but you really can't do anything on the outside. So we took some empty nesters that sold a large house. They moved into this, what's called, and it's literally is called a Ginsburg condominium in northern Westchester. And we actually said, well, what do you want to do? They said, we want to make this very super generic thing ours. So we took this big open living space and this sort of enclosed stair with a little apologetic bathroom that you see. Hello, how you doing? When you walk in the door. Hi, how you doing? How you doing? How you doing? And this kitchen that basically is stopped from any interaction here. We remoted the bathroom. We activated a flue that was optional for a fireplace. We kept the HVAC duct that was here. We just kept it right here. And we actually kept the other duct that was here. And we essentially added a little curve, and we opened up the wall so that when you walked in, you would see through and out to the incredible view over the Hudson River, which is why these things go for too much money. We used very simple generic stone and very simple generic corian to make all this kind of bomb-proof. The cabinets are not incredibly expensive. You know, in these builders' spectacular homes, you have these hollow core, lovely faux doors, and these right out of the Brosco catalog stairs. The glory of this was they actually had solid stringers, so they were self-supporting. The stairs didn't need a wall underneath them. And I said, well, you know, and this is during construction. So I told the owner, you know, we could do what I drew, but, you know, it might be kind of fun, since you live on 4 different levels, to have one part of the house take the only top lighting in the whole house and kind of draw it all the way down to the walkout basement. So we did that. And we did it using stainless steel rods that were actually continuous, unbroken, and we made a completely code-compliant handrail, kept the stairs exactly the way they were. It terminated at the top with a big piece of English brown oak, and made at the top an opening so the light from that one dormer that you saw in the sections would actually bleed through and come down to actually a place where they could actually have tatami mats integrated in the floor so they could actually meditate. On their floor, they took over the entire floor. They were actually 2 bedrooms here. They made it into their floor, where the grandkids would go downstairs, supernumerary guests would go upstairs with an office, but they kept this middle floor. And what we did there was this wall that you banged your brain as you walked into it, pulled away. We made a big sliding glass door here. We made all of these out of cabinets, so they would go away, and we made the bedroom here and doubled the closets and actually made a real laundry room here and actually got a Japanese soaking tub there. All within the exact same inviolate perimeter in terms of windows, walls, everything. So we did these wonderful doors, glass, hung like barn doors. There's our stair behind. That light from those 2 little windows comes down and comes through in the middle of the plan and actually makes the whole thing feel better. We made basically an altar to sleeping for a bed with little tiny pedestals on either side for reading stuff. And at the entry, all we did, since that door had to remain, was make this beautiful piece of furniture as a closet and actually used, again, simple, straight, animated trim. Now, that was the penultimate project. This is the ultimate project. This is actually a project that is hilarious because it was bought in 1991 during the last recession that will end the world. And we went through a 12-year building period of 7 separate distinct projects where either both owners were working, one owner was working, or no owners were working. And it was all done with available equity and funds. And we took a house that was a 2-family, all chopped up and weird, with 2 entries. We made it into a new entry, took out all the schmutz in the middle, and actually took this sort of vaguely bungaloid thing, and made it this.
Wow.
So we went from this to this. And we went from this, isn't that great, to this. And I do say the owners do drink a little. That's kind of how they got through all of this.
Can you flick back to those dormers?
Yes.
Most unusual. Yes.
This is a very technical name in my office. Brian is here. We call these the snark dormers. Actually, they're a lancet dormer. They basically make that corner, and they basically then I reversed it here in this one place. You'll see the interior there, where we basically snarked out that roof corner to sort of be the sister or brother of this, and made this.
That is really creative. Wow.
Checks in the mail. Now to show you how anal and intense these people got. They agonized for at least 7 years on what they were going to do to make one floor for the entire house, one bit of flooring, because it was all these different ungapach, different places and parts and pieces and levels and this. So they saw cypress flooring in a part of our barn, and they said, "That's it, that's brilliant." And I said, "Yes, well, Frank Lloyd Wright used cypress flooring, you know." He said, "Really?" And I said, "That's our leftover siding." They went, really? So, but we got beautiful Pecky cypress from a distributor. Made all the floors that. We also made all the windows larger. We made a real window array so they could have dinner for 18, as we often have here, a Robert Burns dinner with lots of scotch. We took this horrible stair, removed it. They had this weird little dormer that was there, and from the inside, those snarky dormers are now sort of bathed in built-ins that are painted out to be cheap. And there's the other corner dormer. And the cool thing about this is, even though the slide projector turns green into some form of mucus, this is all done with napkin sketches with a really talented cabinet maker in the field, visiting every 3 or 4 days to figure out every detail, and then it all just gets covered with Benjamin Moore, and it becomes very affordable and actually very expressive. And these projects, have a life of their own. There's that window from the outside. They basically go on. And one of the great lessons is, I have a religious crusade. I don't know if pirates have religious crusades. They have, tantrums. I have a horrible hatred of gutters. Gutters are of the devil. They actually ruin houses. They're evil. Well, my dear beloved client friend said, we haven't had gutters on our house for a decade, and we need gutters. And so we actually developed a wonderful system of guttering that I thought was very lovely and interesting and quirky and fun to matches the house. And we also had some conditions in here where leaves got held up. You could see actually the gutters holding leaves, see? So we basically have we clad this whole area in lead-coated copper to stop it from getting fungus and rot. And we then also replaced the pressure-treated wood steps with faux teak steps. And as their knees got crappy, like all of our knees got crappy, we made a really fun place to actually grab as you walked up these steps. And at the back, where we opened it all up, as we were talking about connecting, we made a nice, fun, artful grab bar also. So that is what is happening in our world, where 1/3 of all homeowners, it is estimated, are essentially, effectively underwater. They couldn't move if they wanted to move. They can't sell their house. They can't see where they would buy their house. They also realize that they hate their house. And so they want to do something where they are. And there's only one way to do that, and that is to care enough, to spend enough time, to save enough money, to make things happen. Because you only get 3 things in life: good, fast, and cheap. But you only get 2. The third is excluded. So if it's good and fast, it will not be cheap. If it's cheap and fast, it won't be good. But if it's good and cheap, it will not be fast. So what we now have is time. What we now have is time. We have time to compensate for a lack of money. And when you have a lack of money, things get clarified. Things that used to be go and show and king of the world and the guy with the most toys wins. The truth is, what matters are our families. What matters is what we believe in, what values we've accrued. What matters is really not resale, because your home really can never create a family, but it can reflect what a family values. And those values have transcended resale for most people. Thank you.
Well,